The old woman stood frozen in the doorway of Madison Square Garden, her weathered hands clutching a crumpled ticket, while 20,000 people pushed past her like she was invisible. Her name was Dorothy, though no one had bothered to ask, and at 90 years old she had become a ghost in her own life, until the most famous man in the world noticed her trembling in the chaos. If you're watching this and believe in the power of human kindness, hit that subscribe button right now. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and smash that notification bell, because what happens next will restore your faith in humanity, and I need to know you're with me on this incredible journey. The arena buzzed with electric anticipation for the heavyweight exhibition match, but Dorothy's cloudy eyes saw only a blur of moving bodies and flashing lights. She had saved for months to buy this ticket, a gift to herself for her 90th birthday, but now she wondered if coming alone had been a mistake. The usher at the entrance had barely glanced at her ticket before waving her through, and now she stood lost in a sea of strangers who seemed to look right through her. Muhammad Ali emerged from the VIP section, his massive frame moving with the fluid grace that had made him a legend. Even at 59, retired from the ring for over a decade, his presence commanded attention from everyone, except he wasn't looking at the crowd that turned to stare at him. His eyes had found Dorothy, standing small and confused near the entrance, her silver hair catching the harsh arena lights like a beacon of vulnerability. The champion who had faced down Sonny Liston and Joe Frazier, who had stared down governments and stood up to wars, felt his heart clench at the sight of this forgotten woman. Without hesitation, he changed direction, his entourage following in puzzled silence as he approached the elderly stranger, who had no idea she was about to meet greatness. "Ma'am?" His voice was softer than thunder now, gentled by Parkinson's but still carrying the warmth that had charmed the world. "You look like you might need some help finding your seat." Dorothy looked up, her faded blue eyes widening as she recognized the face that had graced magazine covers and television screens for decades. But instead of the brash, confident boxer she remembered from her younger days, she saw something different, a man whose own battles with illness had taught him to recognize struggle in others. I think I'm lost," she admitted, her voice barely audible above the crowd noise. "Section 214, but everything looks the same to me." Ali extended his arm with the courtly gesture of a man raised in a different era, when respect for elders was not a suggestion, but a sacred duty. "Then we'll find it together. May I?" The crowd began to notice the unusual pair, the legendary boxer and the tiny elderly woman, making their way through the arena. Conversations stopped mid-sentence as people pulled out phones, but Ali's focus remained entirely on Dorothy, asking about her grandchildren, her life, treating her not like a photo opportunity, but like the most important person in the building. As they climbed the stairs to the upper sections, Dorothy's breathing became labored, and without a word, Ali slowed his pace to match hers. When she stumbled slightly on a step, his steady hand was there to catch her, and for a moment the woman who had felt invisible for so long felt protected by the strongest man she had ever met. "You know," Ali said, as they paused for her to catch her breath, "my grandmother used to tell me that how a man treats his elders shows the content of his character. She was the wisest woman I ever knew." Dorothy smiled for the first time that evening, seeing past the famous face to the heart of a man who understood that true strength wasn't measured in knockout punches, but in moments of quiet kindness. They continued their journey through the arena, two souls from different worlds connected by the simple human need to be seen, to be valued, to matter. When they finally reached Section 214, Ali didn't simply point to her seat and leave. He waited as she settled in, adjusting her purse, making sure she was comfortable. The people around them stared in amazement, some recording the interaction, others simply witnessing what felt like a moment from a more gracious time. "Thank you," Dorothy whispered, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I haven't felt this special in years." Ali leaned down, his voice carrying the weight of hard-won wisdom. "Ma'am, you were special long before I showed up. Sometimes we just need someone to remind us." But as the champion prepared to leave, Dorothy reached into her purse and pulled out something that would change everything. A photograph that would reveal why this meeting was more than just a random act of kindness, and why fate had brought them together on this particular night. The photograph trembled in Dorothy's weathered fingers as she held it toward Ali. the arena lights catching the faded edges of a black and white image from 1964. In it, a young soldier in military dress uniform stood proudly next to a beautiful woman in a wedding dress, their faces glowing with the kind of hope that only comes before life teaches its hardest lessons. "That's my son, James," Dorothy whispered, her voice carrying 6 decades of grief. "He was drafted right after this picture was taken. Vietnam took him from me when he was just 22. Ali's expression shifted as he studied the photograph, his hands stilling in that way they did when his mind was processing something profound. The crowd noise around them seemed to fade as Dorothy continued, her words spilling out like water through a broken dam. "He used to talk about you all the time, especially after you refused to go to war. Said you were the bravest man in America for standing up for what you believed in, even when it cost you everything." Her voice cracked. "He said if Muhammad Ali could sacrifice his career for his principles, then maybe there was still honor in this world." The weight of her words hit Ali like a physical blow. Here was a mother whose son had died in the very war he had refused to fight, and instead of hatred she carried admiration for his stand. The irony was not lost on him. While he had been stripped of his titles and banned from boxing for his beliefs, young men like James had been sent to die in a conflict that would haunt America for generations. If you're feeling the power of this moment right now, drop a heart in the comments, because what Dorothy says next will show you why some encounters are written in the stars. "James wrote me letters from Vietnam," Dorothy continued, carefully tucking the photograph back into her purse. "In his last one, he said he understood why you did what you did. He said maybe if more people had your courage, boys like him wouldn't have to die for causes they didn't understand." Ali's eyes filled with tears that had nothing to do with his illness, and everything to do with the crushing weight of survivor's guilt he had carried for decades. Every young man who had died in Vietnam while he fought his battles in courtrooms instead of jungles had left a mark on his conscience, a question that haunted his quiet moments. Had his stand been worth their sacrifice? "Ma'am?" Ali's voice was thick with emotion. "Your son was the brave one. I just said no. He said yes, and paid the price for all of us." Dorothy reached out and took the champion's large hand in both of her small ones, her touch carrying the authority of a mother who had buried her child and lived to find meaning in the loss. "No, you don't understand. James believed that your sacrifice gave meaning to his. He said you showed the world that a man could choose his battles, and that made his choice to serve mean something different. Not blind obedience, but conscious duty." The arena around them had become a cathedral of unexpected grace, where 2 strangers discovered they had been connected by threads of history and loss long before they met. Ali knelt beside Dorothy's seat, bringing himself to her eye level, his famous face transformed by the kind of vulnerability that only comes when we encounter the consequences of our deepest convictions. "I've spent 40 years wondering if I did the right thing," Ali admitted, his voice barely audible. "Meeting you, hearing about James, it's like he's telling me something I needed to hear." Dorothy smiled through her tears, seeing in this moment the completion of a circle that had begun with her son's letters from a jungle half a world away. "He's telling you that courage comes in many forms and that standing up for what's right always matters, even when we can't see how." As Ali slowly stood, his movements careful and deliberate, he made a decision that would honor both Dorothy's son and the lesson this encounter had taught him. He reached into his jacket and pulled out his VIP pass for the evening, the golden credential that would give Dorothy access to the best seats in the house, the after party, and memories that would last whatever time she had left. "James should have been here tonight," Ali said, pressing the pass into her hands. "Since he can't be, you'll watch the fight from my seats as my guest. And after, if you're willing, I'd like to hear more stories about your son." The transformation in Dorothy was immediate and profound. The invisible woman who had been ignored and overlooked suddenly found herself surrounded by Ali's entourage, treated with the respect and attention reserved for visiting dignitaries. But more than the luxury, more than the special treatment, she had been given something infinitely more valuable: the knowledge that her son's memory lived on in the heart of the man he had admired most. As Ali's security team gently escorted Dorothy to the VIP section, she turned back one last time to look at the champion who had seen her when no one else would. In that moment, she understood that some meetings transcend coincidence, that the universe sometimes arranges encounters between souls who need each other's gifts. The fight that night was spectacular, but for Dorothy, the real victory had already taken place in the upper sections of Madison Square Garden, where a legendary boxer had knelt beside an elderly woman and discovered that true greatness isn't measured in championships won, but in the grace we show to those who carry our shared history. Years later, when Dorothy passed away peacefully in her sleep, her family found among her possessions a framed photograph, not the wedding picture of her son, but a new one taken that night at the garden. In it, Muhammad Ali sits beside a radiant elderly woman, both of them smiling with the joy of people who have found unexpected connection in a world that too often keeps us apart. The lesson Dorothy and Ali taught us that night echoes still. In a world that moves too fast and cares too little, the simple act of seeing someone, really seeing them, can heal wounds we didn't know we carried and honor memories we thought were forgotten. Sometimes the greatest champions are those who fight not in rings but in the quiet moments when they choose kindness over indifference, connection over isolation. What's a moment when someone saw you when you felt invisible? Share your story in the comments below, because every act of recognition, no matter how small, has the power to change a life. And if this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to remember that they matter, that they're seen, that their story has value in this beautiful, complicated world we share.